In this video, I'm going to detail every single one of the differences between the Apple Watch Ultra 3 and the Apple Watch Series 11. This is based on both myself as well as my wife putting these watches through the paces over the last little while across swimming, cycling, running, you name it. There are more than 30 differences between these two watches, some of them big items, and then a lot of them are just tiny little things that you may or may not notice or even care about. But on the flip side, there are a ton of things that are just simply identical or otherwise very similar between the watches, and I'll outline all of those towards the end as well. So first up, let's just simply dive into pricing. The Apple Watch Ultra 3 is at $799, the same price as before, and the Apple Watch Series 11 starts at $399 for the 42mm, and then it's $429 for the 46mm. Now, both watches do come with a host of different strap options that are included in that base price. In the case of the Ultra, there are 3 different strap options. Some of those have received a slight upgrade or change this year with the Ultra 3, including this reflective band that you see right there. And in the case of the Series 11, there is a whole slate of sport and non-sport bands alike that you can choose as your base option for that base price. And of course, beyond that, you can buy additional bands from either Apple or third parties. Now, next up, as you probably noticed earlier on, there are basically 3 different case sizes at play here. The first one is a 49mm case size on the Ultra Edition, whereas on the Series 11, there are 2 different case sizes, a 46mm case size and a 42mm case size. You're seeing a couple of these case sizes in both myself as well as my wife. I don't have a 42mm handy right now of the Series 11, but I suspect if you're looking between the Ultra and the Series 11, you're probably comparing the larger case sizes anyway. Next up, there's cellular. Now, all the editions of the Apple Watch Ultra, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, have included cellular, and that is no different here as well, 5G in fact, versus the Series 11, you have to pay for that cellular, and it's an additional basically $100 on top of that price. So $499 for the 42, $529 for the 46, but the titanium edition of the Series 11 does include cellular. It's the only way you can buy that edition. And all these cellular editions across all of Apple's 2025 lineups now include 5G. That matters not so much for like downloading crazy big things onto your watch, but simply the power efficiency gains that we'll talk about in just a second. In any case, when it comes to the case itself, both editions of the Ultra 3 are titanium. However, within the Ultra side, it's worthwhile noting the fact that the black titanium has a DLC coating, which improves scratch resistance in theory, versus the grayish one, the natural one, does not. Now, some of you may be wondering how well that black titanium with the DLC coating holds up long term. Evidence at my Ultra 2 from last year, which has approximately 365 days of activity on it. You can see my move rings right there. 365 days straight of hitting those move ring goals. And in that case, you do see some slight scratches, primarily on the bezel edge itself. The rest of it's pretty darn good. Now, I beat the crap out of my watches. I'm constantly out in the mountains, in the woods, in the ocean, you name it, doing stuff, and often hitting the edges of my watches. So if you were to take care of your watches better than I, you might not have those scratches. Now, let's look at some of the exterior aspects of these watches a little bit more closely. Starting off on the Ultra 2, on the left-hand side, you're going to see that action button. Hang on to that for just a second. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side, you're going to see that the Ultra series has what's called a button card. Basically protects it from accidental button presses and stuff like that. Especially useful when you're wearing a coat or something like that, so you don't accidentally press those buttons. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to see Ultra has a larger digital crown. That just makes it easier to handle with gloves and things like that, whether you're skiing or underwater or whatever it may be. Now, when it comes to the thickness of the watches, the Apple Watch Series 11 is the thinner of the 2 watches at 9.7mm. That case size remains unchanged from last year, versus the Apple Watch Ultra 3 has a 12mm case size. And now, what's notable about this is that last year it had a 14.7mm case size. The case hasn't changed at all. In fact, it's identical to last year. The difference is how Apple measures the case size. In the past, and for all their other watches, they've always excluded the little sensor bump at the bottom there, but they forgot to do that on the Ultra series, starting with the Ultra 1 and the 2, and now they're rectifying that by excluding the sensor bump. So they haven't changed the case size, they just changed how they measure the specs to make it thinner. Everyone else does the same thing. It's annoying. In any case, when it comes to the watch weights, here's all the weights on the screen right there. You don't want me to read all those out, so there you go. Meanwhile, flipping them over, the back case on the Ultra 3 is a ceramic and sapphire glass crystal, versus the Series 11 has a metal and sapphire glass backed case. Again, neither of those have changed this year compared to years past. Meanwhile, the Ultra 3 has mil-spec standards that it's been validated against, primarily around durability, versus the Series 11 does not. Then you get the display differences. In the case of the Ultra 3, it has a sapphire crystal display, and that display is actually the same on the titanium edition of the Series 11, versus if you go down to the base Series 11 watches, that has an INX display, and in the case of the Series 11, it got a new ceramic coating on top of that they're claiming makes it 2 times stronger than the past. Now, my experience with breakage of Apple Watches is it's incredibly difficult to do. That said, last year while filming this very video, I managed to drop my Series 9 Apple Watch, which has the exact same display as the Series 10, but does not have that new coating as the Series 11. In that case, I dropped it like straight down onto a concrete surface, exactly hitting the display itself, and put a tiny little nick in there. Now, whether or not the new ceramic coating on the Series 11 would have made a difference there, I don't know. But let's be clear, both of these watches are incredibly durable, and I treat my watches like crap and beat the crap out of them as well. And that was the very first time I managed to actually do damage to a display on not just that watch, but honestly any watch at all. Speaking of things that are impressive, if you could just watch this video all the way through, that's the only thing the YouTube gods care about these days, and it really would help with this video and the channel quite a bit. Now, let's talk a little bit more about these displays. In the case of the Ultra 3, it has a higher max brightness, 3000 nits versus 2000 nits on the Series 11. Realistically speaking, you won't generally notice that. That's only peak brightness, and it only is going to hit that for a couple seconds at a time. I live on a sunny island in the Mediterranean, and I have no problem seeing either display at all. Meanwhile, at the other end of the spectrum, both watches actually have the exact same minimum nit value of 1 nit. That's probably one of the hardest things for watch companies to do correctly, and that means that in the middle of the night, it's not going to blind you. And then both watches also have the ability to now show the second hand in a dim state. So the Series 10 got that last year, carried it into the Series 11, but the Ultra 3 only got that this year. This means that when your wrist is down like this, you can still see the second hands going around, versus the Ultra 2 actually did not have that capability. Both watches could have always displayed the seconds in the full always-on brightness state, but just not in that dim state. Now, from a screen tech standpoint, both watches have the newer LTPO3 screen technology that was added to the Ultra 3 this year. It was added to the Series 10 last year, and it carries through here. This means they're identical from a screen tech standpoint, and in theory, that improves off-angle visibility and viewing. In most cases, I don't see any differences at all between the Series 2 and the Series 3 with the newer display, but at least they are the same there. Keeping in mind though that the Ultra 3 has a flat display glass on top of it versus the Series 11 is slightly curved, so that can lead to some slight differences to how you perceive the display. But that said, if you're coming from something older like a Series 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever, in that case you will see some notable differences there, not only from display brightness, but the off-angle piece as well. Now, when it comes to the display area itself, these are nearly identical. You can see the exact specs down there in square millimeters. That's how you measure it, folks. But the Ultra 3 got a very tiny 5% bump this year to make it bigger than the Series 10 last year, because last year the Series 10 was actually a bigger display area than the Ultra 2. Now the Ultra 3 is back on top just by almost nothing whatsoever to be slightly bigger than the Series 11. Okay, so with all like the case bits, let's start digging deeper into the insides. And one way we do that is the action button on the Ultra 3. This button is not on the Series 11 or any other series watches. It's just on the Ultra series, and this allows you to customize it to a given action. By default, for example, it opens up the workout app just to be able to quickly get into that workout app, but you can change it to other functions as well. In addition to that, the Apple Watch Ultra has what's called precision start. So that means when you get to the start of a race line, you can get the GPS all set, your heart rate locked, and then you actually press the start button when you cross that line. Versus in the case of the Series 11, you have this 3, 2, 1 countdown, and then it finds GPS and heart rate lock. For reasons that defy any logic whatsoever, Apple has always kept this separated, which is silly because every single company on the planet is capable of pressing a button and having it start the activity then, versus having to have a dedicated. Anyways, it's just Apple. As for other workout related things here, in the case of the Ultra 3, you get 7 workout data fields, including the time in the upper right hand corner. In the case of the Series 11, you get 6 workout data fields. These are customizable data fields. You also have additional customizable data pages on both of them. And then next on the sporty realm, the Ultra 3 has a multi-band or dual frequency GPS chipset and antenna in it, versus the Series 11 does not. That generally improves the GPS tracks in really tough GPS scenarios, primarily like downtown corridors in New York City, for example, up against mountain cliffs and whatnot. That said, in almost all of my testing between these two watches side by side, I'm seeing virtually no differences between the Ultra 3 and the Series 11. But side by side on land, here's the Ultra 3 versus the Series 11 through a bunch of high-rise hotel areas, and they're basically identical across the board. But talking about the outdoors and mountain activities, that brings us to one of the biggest differences between the Ultra 3 and the Series 11, which is the Ultra 3 added two-way satellite messaging. And that means means that you can communicate where there's no cellular coverage at all. Within at least the coverage regions that they have, there's roughly 17 regions as of the shooting of this video. Essentially North America and a whole chunk of Europe is covered there, but you can check Apple's website because they're going to be constantly adding new regions. But within that, you get basically 3 core features. The first one is emergency SOS. So either you or someone else gets hurt, you're out of cellular range, you can use this to contact what are effectively emergency response centers, which will get help to you wherever you are, a helicopter, ambulance, whatever it may be, to your location. The second is two-way text messaging on either iMessage or SMS. That's non-emergency, just simply you want to let your friend know that you got somewhere, wherever it may be, you can do that. And then the third is updating your Find My location via satellite as well. So the idea that you're maybe on a trek somewhere, and at the end of the day, you just simply update your Find My location so your friends and family know you got to camp or whatnot. Those are all things requiring a different antenna design that is on the Ultra 3, that is not on the Series 11. But within the redesign of the antenna for these satellite bits, they added basically 2 antennas here that are not on the Series 11. There's one antenna which is primarily used for most of the 5G calling that you would have, but there's also a secondary antenna when things get dire from like a coverage standpoint, they can power up, and that should get you just over the edge to maintain that call where in areas that you might have previously dropped that. Those are things not available on the Series 11. Now, if you're going far somewhere, you might probably care about battery life, so let's talk about that. In the case of the Apple Watch Ultra 3, basically it's going to give you like 2 to 2.5 days of battery life, versus the Series 11 is going to give you like 1 and plus strong days. In the case of the Series 11, it got a battery boost this year, the first time ever to go from Apple's 18-hour all-day battery life to Apple's 24-hour all-day battery life. And in the case of the Ultra 3, it also got a battery boost as well that mostly manifests itself in some of the GPS modes. You can see those battery claims down there at the bottom. In my testing in the past, they've always just slightly exceeded those numbers in real-world testing out in the mountains and stuff like that. There's also a low power mode as well that is offered on both watches that substantially increases the battery life as well. It does turn off some of the features behind the scenes. Lastly, on the battery side, there's the charging times itself. In the case of the Ultra 3, goes from 0 to 80% in 45 minutes. That's actually 15 minutes faster than the Ultra 2 did. But keeping in mind, of course, here that while it takes longer to charge that battery lasts essentially twice as long. So, you know, some trade-offs there. Now, the last kind of deep woodsy item to talk about here is the fact that the Ultra series has an emergency siren on it, and it's something that you can hear a really long ways away out in the wilderness. The Series 11 does not have that. Next, we got a whole random bucket of differences I want to point out. Some of these are big tickets, some of these are little, just depends on whether or not you care about them. The Ultra 3 has a water resistance of 100 meters versus the Series 11 has a water resistance of 50 meters. Next, in the case of the Ultra 3, it has a depth gauge with a deeper allowable depth versus the Series 11 has one that's good for like snorkeling and kind of just playing to the surface, but doesn't go quite as deep. That's 40 meters for the Ultra 3 and 6 meters for the Series 11. That's because, of course, the Ultra 3 is designed for diving. I've taken the scuba diving as well in the past, versus the Series 11 is more on the snorkeling realm. And further, in the case of the Ultra 3, that depth gauge is fully certified for scuba usage and scuba standards. I've gone into a whole video on that in the past as to how that works, how the certification works, versus the Series 11 doesn't have that depth gauge certification. It's worthwhile noting, having used the Ultra series watches for scuba diving a bunch of times over the past few years, you do really need the Oceanic Plus app on this watch in order to have it work as a viable scuba diving computer. The depth gauge that you have here by default included for free is just going to show you depth. It's not really going to do much else from a scuba standpoint, versus the Series 11 does have that snorkeling feature still there down to the 6 meters or so, which is again good for just kind of playing around and seeing the fish and whatnot and seeing how far you went. Now, next up, an entirely different direction, the Ultra 3 has 3 microphones versus the Series 11 has 1 microphone. It uses those extra microphones for noise canceling. Of course, this really only matters if you happen to take phone calls and whatnot from your wrist. Otherwise, it won't matter too much to you. Likewise, from a speaker standpoint, the Ultra 3 has 2 speakers and the Series 11 has 1 speaker. In my testing side by side and with a decibel meter, there is virtually no difference between these watches. I can't perceive a difference with my ears, and the decibel meter cannot see a difference either. I'm sure there's some minutia difference, but me and the decibel meter can't figure it out. Now, it's worthwhile noting the Apple Watch Ultra 3 does have 2 additional watch faces that are not on the Series 11. You can see right there the modular one as well as the waypoints one. those are unique to the Ultra series. And in addition, the Apple Watch Ultra 3 also has a night mode, that's that red mode that you see right there, that is not offered on the Series 11. Okay then, so let's talk about all the things that are the same. There are a ton of things that are the same, and we're talking probably thousands of features if you count all the little toggles and whatnot in these watches, and that's because both watches run watchOS 26, that was released a few days ago now, and so they're going to have all virtually the same features from there. But I want to highlight a few features just because they're things that have popped up. Both watches have the new sleep score feature that was announced last week. Both watches have the hypertension or high blood pressure notification feature that was also announced last week. Both watches have the same optical heart rate sensor on them. Both watches have blood oxygen. Yes, that's available now in the US as well as of the latest legal tangle back and forth. It's currently available in any case. Both watches have the medically certified ECG feature on them. Both watches have the also medically certified sleep apnea feature on them. Both watches have high heart rate notifications on them, and both watches have wrist temperature tracking on them. Both watches have all the same sport profiles on them, and both watches include the ability to now push workouts from your phone to the watches themselves using the new custom workout creator they just added last week. Both watches have a compass on them. Both watches have full offline maps if you download them from your phone to your watch. Both of them have the ability to create offline routes using Apple Maps, though that data set for the offline maps is much better in North America in parks for trails than it is in Europe for trails. Both watches can play music via the speaker, just in case I didn't make that clear earlier. Both watches have 64 gigs of storage on them. Both have the 4-core neural engine, the exact same 4-core neural engine on both the devices. And both units have water temperature sensors when you are out playing in the water. And then beyond that, because both watches are designed by the same team, there are a gazillion more features that are 100% identical between these two watches that aren't covered in the previous 50 or so items of differences. Now, some of you may wonder which watch I prefer. As I mentioned earlier on, I wore the Apple Watch Ultra 2 for the last 365 days and have just switched over to the Apple Watch Ultra 3. The primary reason in the past that I would select the Ultra watch was the fact that it just had longer battery life. I didn't feel like charging this thing every single day, versus the Ultra would generally give me about 2 full days, including 1 to 2 hours of GPS workout time per day. Now in my case, that is solidified even further with the addition of the satellite connectivity pieces. Where I live, it is a mere 5-minute run until I'm in cell iffy range, and about a 10 to 15-minute run until I'm hard out of cellular range along some cliff sides and whatnot, places that no one would ever find me when I'm out on my trail runs if something were to happen. So the ability to have a watch that I can message for help if I need it is something that's super handy, especially just for my more casual runs. But of course, you do you based on what features and price points and whatnot you care about. As always, if I missed something, just simply drop it down in the comments there and I'll bubble it up. Now don't forget, I got my full reviews of the Apple Watch Ultra 3 as well as the Series 11 and the SE3 coming over the next couple days, so definitely hit subscribe for those. With that, thanks for watching.